Hello music lovers, music geeks and music freaks like me. My name is Caeser Pink.
Let your mama down. Let your mama down. Let your mama down. Baby, please.
Today we're going to listen to a song called Toccata by Emerson, Lake and Palmer. But before we do that, please like and subscribe. It really helps us grow our channel. All the proceeds from this channel are donated to the nonprofit organization called the Arete Living Arts Foundation. A very good cause. And if you want to do more, you could join our Patreon page or make a one-time donation via PayPal. Everything's in the links below in the description. Now, for those that don't know, Emerson, Lake and Palmer was a prog rock band that were at their most popular probably around 1973, which is roughly around this time this video is recorded. They were prog rock, so one of the things they would be to do kind of rock electronic versions of classical music pieces. That's what this is. It's called Toccata, and it is a reimagining of a piece called Toccata Concertata by Argentinian composer Alberto Ginestra. Now, it's a very odd piece of music, really far out there. And these were really interesting times. You know, this was on an album called Brain Salad Surgery. One of the songs was longer than one side of the album. The song began on the first side, and then it faded out, and it came back in the second side. And a lot of strange music, but then it had this one kind of ballad on it, and that became a big hit. So, because of that, that's one of the main reasons why they were a big success commercially. But it was interesting how you would have an album with one or two songs that would become hits, and the rest of the album would be very unusual experimental music. And that's the way music was when I was a very little kid, like in grade school or 7th and 8th grade. And it really influenced the way I see music. And because of that, I see a lot of music as boring these days, and I have felt that way for decades. It's not innovative, it's not surprising, it's all very predictable. It's unfortunate that, in theory you can play music, that is innovative and unpredictable, but it's highly unlikely you're going to have any commercial success. And these days, it's highly unlikely you'll get any kind of recording contract. But about this piece, apparently they recorded this, and they had a hard time getting permission from the composer. So Keith Emerson, the band's keyboard player, flew down to Argentina to meet with him. And over the years, I've heard him tell this story different ways. And the first time I read this story, which is way back in the 70s, he said the composer listened to it and yelled out what he thought was horrible. But what he actually said was formidable, being a positive exclamation. Then, decades later, I heard him tell the same story, and the words that the composer yelled out were different. I don't know, but either way, apparently the composer liked it and allowed them to do this. Let's give a listen to a little bit of it. Here we go, Emerson, Lake and Palmer, Toccata, live at the California Jam in 1974. Now, one thing funny that you'll notice there is these were the early days of using synthesizers. Now, every synthesizer has a few knobs you turn. In those days, you actually had patch bays, like open electronics, and you'd pull these plugs out. And if you see behind him, it's like a wall of electronics, and in order to change the sound, he has to pull these things out and change them around. It's really kind of amazing. And they had at MoMA, the New York Museum of Modern Art, they had an exhibition of famous musicians' instruments. And one of the things they had was that synth set up there, so you couldn't touch it, but you can get pretty close and take a look at it. That was kind of fun and amazing. But let's go back to the song. Now, my first instrument was the drums, and I had just been playing a couple years when this came out. I was still a very little kid, a grade school kid, so I thought this guy was the greatest. He had all of these drums and gongs and timpani and bells, and the big bell above his head that he would sometimes grab the string with his teeth and ring it. And he completely overplayed everything. Sometimes it seemed like he could barely keep a beat, which is just the kind of thing a young, immature musician would love. But also, this is considered to be the first use of synthesizer drums or electronic drums. Apparently he had triggers in there. I don't know if they were pre-programmed or how it worked. So when I was a little kid, I wanted a drum synthesizer, and it was mainly unheard of, and I didn't have a lot of money, so I eventually found one from a music store. It used to be a big music store down by Washington, D.C., and I saved up for a long time. I was probably maybe in ninth grade, and went and got this crazy instrument. I wish I still had it. Quite a few years later, when I was gigging a lot, I needed a new drum pedal and a couple other things, and I went and traded the drum synthesizer for some equipment I needed, but a very vintage instrument if I'd have it now. But here we go. Let's watch more of this crazy percussion segment. There you go. Despite some of the silliness, it's really a mind-blowing piece of music. It sounds ahead of its time even now. Now, the bass player and singer for the band is Greg Lake, who was a singer for King Crimson during their first two albums. And their first album is widely considered to be the first prog rock album. These guys were very skilled musicians, particularly Keith Emerson. Now let's take a minute and listen to the original classical version of this piece. For those who think classical music is boring, you can take a little nap. We'll wake you up in 6 minutes. Here we go. Toccata, Concertata by Alberto Ginestra. So far, the only thing I've seen that Emerson, Lake and Palmer did, which the original composer didn't do, is the big percussion solo. There are kind of elements hidden in, but it's very interesting to see. I mean, it's essentially the same music, but played in different instruments and arranged differently. How one composition can sound so completely different, put in a different context. Well, whether it's played as a classical orchestra piece or by a prog rock band, either way, it's an incredible piece of music. Now, something about rock in the 70s, as I said, the synthesizer was kind of a new instrument. And anytime you wanted a sound, you kind of had to create it from scratch. You got some kind of wave. You'd pick out a sine wave or a square wave, or maybe you'd add some white noise or some pink noise. You'd run it through filters. So you were creating the raw sound. And usually people used it to create sounds you would never hear before. You know, can I make this keyboard sound nastier than, you know, a Jimi Hendrix guitar solo? Then what happened in the 80s, they started making digital synthesizers. And the way they are used and what they were used for became very different. Now it became, oh, I can make this keyboard sound like a trumpet or an xylophone, anything. And it also meant I don't have to pay those musicians. I can just play it all on the keyboard and save a ton of money. And to me, synthesizers became a much less interesting instrument, and it made music less interesting and cheesier sounding, because a lot of times those synthesizers copying other instruments really didn't do that good of a job. But over recent decades, analog, the original synths, became available again, and they sort of had best of both worlds. You could create a sound from scratch and then actually save those controls and go back to it with one button, as opposed, you know, during the 70s when you're trying to plug in things to get that same sound and do it while you're playing. When I saw Keith Emerson's keyboard, it had a little piece of paper taped to it that were the patches needed for one of the songs they played. But very interesting music. And as I said, hearing stuff like that when I was very young really affected the way I view the possibilities of music, what music could be. And I think if you grow up and all that you hear is music that's very formulaic, like you hear in pop music, that becomes music to you. And then when you go through life and you encounter music that outside that box, it's a little bit harder for you to enjoy it and understand it and digest it. People have a tendency to shy away from things they don't understand. So I'm really grateful that when I was very young, I heard all kinds of music coming from what was popular commercial music at the time. It was really an amazing time musically. But if you want to hear more, Emerson, Lake and Palmer, probably their first 4 albums are all really incredible works. They kind of went downhill. The prog rock movement was odd, like it flowered at the same time and then quickly went downhill at the same time. But anyways, that's Emerson, Lake and Palmer, Toccata. Thank you for joining me. I hope to see you again soon. Bye-bye.